Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, or afternoon, if that is the case for your class. I am obviously not with you today, but you guys are going to continue without me, and then I will be back throughout the week. I have some meetings this morning, so I wasn't able to be with you. Today, you guys are going to be taking a little bit of time to get a kind of brief introduction to the judicial system, because next time in class, we are going to get started with your court cases. And it'll be helpful to remember how the justice system works before I make you do a mock trial. So after our judicial system notes and introduction, you guys will have the opportunity to finish or keep working on your CATS menu. If you have finished all of the items of your CATS menu today, you can take all those things, staple them to the menu. So you're going to tear the menu out, staple it together, and turn it in. If you don't finish today, you're going to submit those by Friday or Monday next week. So basically, you've got today as work time, and otherwise it's homework for the next time that we meet. On Wednesday and Thursday, we're going to take some time to continue our Black Hills Humane Society projects. I've got some feedback from the Humane Society about your projects, and we need to give you guys a little bit of time to do some more organization. We will then also be spending some time talking about the court cases you're going to be trying. You'll find out which court case your class is going to be in charge of, and we're going to start to organize you guys into the prosecution and the defense so that you can start to prepare your arguments for your case. And then finally on Friday or Monday, if you don't have this class on Friday this week, what we'll be looking at is reviewing how to use some digital resources. We are going to do a little activity with that to help us practice digital resources. And that is actually going to be instruction that's going to be helpful for both the court case and for your Black Hills Humane Society research. And then finally, you'll have some time to work on your court case with your groups on Friday. So that being said, that's kind of the outline of the week. Let's get started in learning about the judicial system. So basically, our purpose of this today is just to give some essential outlines of how the legal system works, because you are going to be playing like you're part of the legal system, and it's maybe helpful to understand how that works. So at this point, you're actually going to pause my video and watch a crash course video that talks about the legal system basics. We're then going to come back to this YouTube video, and you're going to take some notes from the that are based off of the crash course video that we're looking at. So as you guys pause and move on to the crash course video, maybe get ready to take some notes. You don't need to take notes during the crash course video, just when you come back to me. So go ahead and pause and move over to crash course. All right, so welcome back. I hope that the crash course video was enlightening to you. There are some challenges of crash course videos, mainly that they talk really, really fast. And so I want to highlight some of the key things that I think are important for you to know out of that video. And I would like you to record these in your notes so that you can reference them over the month as we are researching and preparing your mock trial. So the big thing to start with is that there are three essential functions of the legal system. The first one is to settle disputes. So if you have a problem with your neighbor, or you have a problem where somebody's broken the law, the court is there to settle what's happening with those issues. Now, we generally prefer to settle things out of court, right? It's better if you can solve your problems without having to go before a judge. But in case you can't, the judges are there in order to help settle those types of disputes. So that's the first major function of the legal system. The second major function is to interpret law, which can be a little tricky. I want you to take a second and look at this cartoon and tell me which person is right, the person in the hat or the person without a hat. So if you said that they are both right and both wrong, I think you'd be correct. And unfortunately, that's often how our legal system works. We write a law, we pass it through Congress, and then it goes out into the real world, and it's tricky to see how it actually impacts the real world, and it's hard to know exactly what was intended and to interpret how that law should be applied. And that's why we need the legal system, because sometimes, you know, these two gentlemen in this cartoon are in a disagreement. And they need somebody to come in and say, we're going with Hatman or not. And that job in our society falls to the legal system. Oh, let me get my slide to move forward. There we go. Oh, now it went too fast. There we go. So then the third basic function of the legal system is that it creates expectations for future action. So if you break a law or there is a dispute, it's the legal system that sort of sets the bar as far as how you're going to be punished. Is this something that's relatively minor? So you might get the proverbial slap on the wrist. You didn't get a very significant punishment. or is this a big deal and you might end up with lots of financial impact or in prison? So the legal system kind of helps us set our bar as to whether or not some of these violations or disputes are a big deal or are more minor. Okay, so then we need to look at the federal court system. Most of the cases that you guys are going to be looking at are going to be tried in the federal courts. We have one case that is actually a state court, but it's the highest court or the highest court within that state. So it's still a significant case, but I want to review quickly a couple of concepts related to the federal system because most of your cases are going to be in the federal system. So the first thing to remember is that the federal courts are a separate branch of government, right? We have the judicial system, we have the, oh no, I just lost it, the legislative branch, and we have the executive branch. So as a separate branch of government, it serves to provide a check on the other two branches of government. So it is separate. The courts in the judicial system are set up to be hierarchical. So you start at a lower court, you can appeal to the next court up and appeal to the next court up. If that's accepted, you can actually go all the way up to the Supreme Court if you have a case that merits going to that level. They perform judicial review, which again is that like check on the other systems. So they will review things that come out of the legislature, like the House and the Senate. They also review things that are done by the executive branch to say whether or not those are in line or out of line with current law. And then finally, the other thing that they do to make sure that this is a separate branch of government and that the judges can't be influenced by politics, or at least can't be influenced by politics, is that judges are appointed from life, are appointed for life, and they're protected from some politics. In the video, they mentioned that they, basically none of the other branches can change what they're paid. So you can't make more money. You can't increase the pay of a judge if you want to influence the court this way. You can't decrease the pay of a judge to punish them when they make a wrong decision if you don't like their decision and you're the president or the Senate. They are protected from those sorts of punishments. So once we look at that, the other another vocab piece that we just need to look at and help you guys know what you are going to be looking at in your court cases is that the issue of statutes versus common law. So statutes are like the actual laws that are written by the Senate and the House. They've been passed by both of those and signed by the president, and they are a law. They are a statute. If you've ever seen the I'm Just a Bill Schoolhouse Rock, that process creates statutes. So these are the laws as written by the other two branches of government. The challenge is, just like that cartoon we looked at earlier with the pieces of wood on the ground, once you take a law that's been written and you start to apply it in the real world, it gets legs of its own and it can be applied in a different way. It's no longer just the statute. It creates something called common law because the way that that law is applied in the real world means that there are some consequences and maybe it has implications that we weren't expecting, sort of like this cartoon. So it's not always that there are bad consequences of what's created in the legislature. It's just that there are things that they can't anticipate. Just like in this cartoon, legislature, people in the Senate and the House are trying to create public policy. They're trying to write laws that fix problems in our society, just like this guy is trying to fix a problem in the building. The challenge is that in writing that law, once it goes out into society, there are unintended consequences. Positive ones, negative ones, but unintended. And the term that we've created is all of those unintended consequences fall under the term of common law. So like in this cartoon, the itty bitty rock that guy is pulling out of the picture, that is the statute. That's the law that they're going to actually install into public policy. And then all of the unintended consequences are common law, or how that public policy is practiced and assigned in the real world. Your cases that you guys are going to be trying are primarily around issues of common law. They reference back to laws and statutes, but those laws and statutes aren't clear on some of these issues. And so the courts are struggling with how do we apply the law to this case that isn't really clearly, like it doesn't exactly fit the statute. And so they are creating or applying common law in the cases that you guys are going to be looking at. All right, so then there are three types of law. There's criminal, which is, you broke a law. And if you have criminal cases, that's where you're looking at having jail time, fines, all of those sorts of things. There are civil courts, which is where you can have suing, things like divorce court, all those sorts of things fall under civil. It's also where tort law takes place. And tort law we'll talk more about if it applies to your court case. But otherwise, if you have some free time and are interested in law, look up tort law, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it unless it directly applies to you guys. The big thing is if it's in a civil court, you need to know that the punishment is not that you're going to go to jail. It's usually some sort of financial arrangement. So punishment is going to mean money, basically. And then finally, we get into issues of public law. And public law is where there's some element of either a criminal case or a civil case that means it's going to jump up to a federal level. So either it has a federal issue at stake, like some issue of human rights or equality, or in this case, animal rights, or it might be something that's subject to a federal law or a federal agency as part of the court or part of the case. Many of the cases that you guys are trying, it is a individual or an organization has sued a federal agency. And so it automatically jumped into that area of public law because a federal agency was involved. So you guys will primarily be working in the area of public law. So these are not cases that started out at the lowest level of courts. They started out a little bit higher. They aren't Supreme Court cases, but they're definitely high courts in the state or in the federal system. There we go. So there are two types of trials as well. There are bench trials, where you would just take your case before a judge, and the judge gets to decide what's going on, and jury trials. Now, in the real world, many of the cases that you guys are going to be trying were actually bench cases, but it's way more fun and helpful for you guys if we run all of your cases as jury trials. Because when you have a jury trial, you get to bring witnesses, you get to have research and statements, and it's just going to be a lot more fun for us. So whether or not your court started out as a jury case, we are going to run all of them as a jury case. I will be recruiting jurors from other classes that are going to come and serve as a jury of your peers. They will not have prior knowledge of the case that you are trying because no jury ever does. That's part of the joy of a jury, is that they're supposed to be impartial citizens. So they will know that they are coming to try a case about animals, and then they'll show up that day, and they will make a judgment based on your arguments. Okay, so then the other thing we want to talk about is just the different types of courts. There are federal courts, which are on the left side of the screen here, and then there are state courts on the right side. So we start out with lower courts, like the state trial courts, state court of appeals, and then we get to the highest state court, which is sort of like the Supreme Court, but of your state. And then those things can go on to the Supreme Court if they get all the way through the state system. On the federal side, we have the U.S. District Court and the U.S. Court of Appeals. Those are automatically a little bit more significant and higher up in the system than the state trial courts. And the red circles indicate places where your trials that you guys are going to be running through are taking place. So some of you are going to be trying a court case that's either in the district courts or the Court of Appeals, so they're federal cases. And there's one case that is a case out of Idaho, but it did reach the highest court in Idaho, and I think it's an interesting enough piece for us to look at that even though we're not in Idaho, it's going to be a fun one for us to get into. So just so you guys know, nobody's trying a Supreme Court case, but you are all going to be retrying a case that was at a significant level in our judicial system. Okay, so why not any Supreme Court cases? There's a couple of reasons. One, if we did a Supreme Court case, you guys wouldn't be able to do witnesses, there wouldn't be a jury, and it's just not as much fun. But don't worry, as we go through this unit, we are going to be investigating some of the laws related to animal rights and welfare, as well as some of the major historical cases that have come before the Supreme Court. So we'll talk about those things. We're just not going to try them because they're less fun. It's just one person gets up and gives a long speech, and it's way more fun for you guys to get to retry something in more of a jury setting. All right, so here's a quick summary, an introduction of the cases coming before our Companion Animal Science Court. These cases are going to be split in between the different classes. You don't know which one you're going to try yet. We'll figure that out later this week. So the first case is Associated Dog Clubs of New York versus the United States Department of Agriculture and the Humane Society of the United States. And that one relates to if you can sell animals online and what are the welfare requirements that you have to meet if you do sell them online. The second case is In Defense of Animals versus the Cleveland Metro Park Zoo, And that one involves the movement of endangered species for breeding purposes, and whether or not that should be allowed, and what stipulations should be in place in order to allow that. Next up, we have Patrick D. Hawker versus United States Department of Agriculture. This one related to housing standards or welfare standards that were required of this individual if he wanted to house exotic cats, like lions and tigers, exotic cats. So we'll take a look at that one. And then we have two additionals because we have 5 companion animal science class. The next one is the Cox family, basically Lee and Becky Cox of Pixie Pal's Kennel versus the United States Department of Agriculture. And that one got into whether or not there was a willful violation of the Animal Welfare Act. We have talked in this class about that cruelty can happen abuse can happen by accident, but cruelty cannot. This is an example of a case where they got into that issue of whether or not this was something that happened by accident or if there was a willful violation of the Animal Welfare Act. Next up, we have Peter Renaud of the Sabre Foundation versus Idaho State. Sabre Foundation is an organization that is trying to build tiger genetics. And so they house tigers in the United States. They breed tigers in the United States in order to try to help prevent the loss of this endangered species and to improve the genetics of the overall species. But there was a big permitting issue around owning those tigers and breeding those tigers in Idaho. And we're going to get into that. So those are the 5 cases that you might be involved in. And later this week, you'll get to find out which one you are going to do. But for today, that is the end of our notes. So you guys can put away your judicial notes. We will be referencing those throughout the upcoming month. That will give you a snapshot. Next time I will be here in class and we will figure out what court case you will be trying. And we will be looking at splitting you guys into which side of the issue are you going to be on. Are you going to be defending the United States Department of Agriculture? Are you going to be representing the Sabre Foundation? I don't know. You're going to find out next time. With our remaining time today, I do want you guys to take some time to work on the CATS menu. So again, that's on page 118 in your animal science notebook. This is the last classroom time that you're going to get to work on the CATS menu, so it's important that you use this time well today. If you finish, tear out the page, staple it to all of the things that you've created for your CATS menu, and turn it into the box. If you're not quite finished today, that's all right. It is either due on Friday if you have class on Friday, or it is due on Monday if you have class on Monday. So just keep that in mind. If you don't quite finish today, you might need to tear that out, take it home, do a little bit of homework, and bring it in to me by the end of this week or by the end of the day Monday. So thank you guys so much, and thank you for being kind to our sub today. Have a good day. Bye-bye.